The following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Welcome to the Double Fist Punch Podcast, the only podcast where we advocate for inefficient violence. My name is Rick, and I'm joined here by
Rich.
And we're here to discuss
And Julian,
Star
who's
Trek.
in uniform, but our uniforms are still in.
Yes.
I am.
Are not here yet.
Wrong hand.
Yes,
So.
I figured when I placed the order, I put my phone number. I was like, oh, okay, they'll text me or call me, or no.
No, this is why I told you should always put your email in when you order stuff online. That way you can track it obsessively like I do.
Well,
So hopefully next time.
yes.
I realized I had a Star Trek shirt, so
No, well, good.
I had something I could wear.
Yeah.
So we're back for episode 2. Our pilot episode. It's like we didn't get canceled.
Mhm.
They ordered a second pilot. So this is not the second pilot, but we could kind of compare that if we wanted to.
Yeah, the studio hated the first episode, so
They used to get rid of the Vulcan.
Yeah.
And
You're actually going to see the third episode that
Yes.
we produced for. That's not true at all. That would be funny though. Like it was just,
like another pilot, but they changed the ship again.
we just have we just had the first episode being sent out on Spotify, being the episode where we talk about. I'd guess it'd be the menagerie by that point.
Right. We'll be at that point. So
Speaking of episodes,
yeah, that's what we're going to cover. We're continuing. We're going to actually cover the actual pilot
Yeah,
that was not aired first, which was aired as the third episode.
yeah, we'll be covering where no man has gone before.
Well, they should
Actually,
include that in
have
the
it right
in
here.
the thing, in the Kirk's thing there.
Yeah, and we have a convenient little blurb here.
Another VHS.
The flight recorder of the 200-year-old USS Valiant relays a tale of terror, a magnetic storm at the edge of the galaxy. As the Enterprise nears the same barrier, Kirk elects to probe beyond its depths with disastrous results. Kirk's closest friend, Lieutenant Gary Mitchell, Gary Lockwood, I appreciate that they put the actors in there.
Yeah.
Is affected. When Mitchell's mutating ESP abilities threaten the safety of his ship, Kirk must make an agonizing decision: maroon Mitchell on a desolate planet or kill him while he still can. However, as one friendship dies, another is just beginning. And that I like watch the episode there, and I don't really understand. I'm not sure what it's referring to by the
I think
friendship
you're starting to
beginning.
understand. Like, there's a moment in that episode towards the end when Spock, kind of, starts to. I forget he says like I felt for him too, in the very last scene. And there may be hope for you yet someday, Mr. Spock. And Spock kind of smiles, which he shouldn't. And but I think they're just kind of, obviously there was always a plan that Gary Lockwood and Sally Kellerman were not going to be regulars.
Yeah.
or poor Kelso. Shout out to Kelso, who didn't last very long. Hardly knew you. And Dr. Piper, who also didn't make it. No, but I like it's a good pilot. You can see that they fix some things clearly from the cage, which we're going to get to when we review the menagerie. But the costumes are a little bit different. The set's been upgraded a little bit. I don't Sulu the mathematician. Like the ships have a mathematician. Like I taught math, and we don't need that. We got computers, right? No, but I think that you start to see Star Trek to become, and obviously William Shatner is a better choice than Jeffrey Hunter, right? Wouldn't you say? Like I think Shatner is iconic to the role.
Yeah, I think Shatner has a lot of like an empathetic but very confident demeanor.
Yeah. Do you feel like the characters? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of characters missing because there's none of the regular cast is essentially here besides Scotty Sulu, who we barely see. Scotty has his accent. He has a couple interactions. He's the chief engineer, but it seems like Kelso's got more power than him. through this episode, like because it seems like like Kelso's kind of the leading the way, and and when they're trying to fix the ship. I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but how did you feel like when you watched that episode? How did you feel like? Did Shatner and Nimoy kind of already kind of seem like they had the characters kind of? You had a good sense of where the characters were going to be going.
I think Nimoy was still settling in. I think Kirk generally had what he would have for the rest of the series, but like, you kind of see it in Nimoy's acting in this episode. Like he's not as cold and calculating as he becomes. You see him smile a couple times. So I think at this point, he like the Spock character was more of a person that experienced emotions differently than humans, rather than not experiencing.
I agree with that a lot. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of funny because like I think I said this in last episode. Some characters, it takes them years for their character to develop on the show. Where Kirk Shatner comes in, and I don't think we make fun of his acting because it's acting style at the time. But at the same time, like,
and schmacked it.
The character doesn't really, the character doesn't evolve significantly. Like in terms of, he's not significantly different as the captain in episode 1 as he is in the last episode. Like, he's pretty much, there's some development, but for the most part, he's pretty much Captain Kirk.
Yeah, like, he is, I think, honestly, his acting gets kind of worse as he goes on. Like, he gets more hammy, I think, in my opinion.
Probably.
Like, especially once you get into season 2.
Yeah.
Like, he really starts to ham it up a little bit.
Yeah, I struggle a little bit watching season 3. There's some episodes in season 3 when we get to it that I'll be like, I got nothing. Like, this, like, your line was like, well, that happened. Like, there's some things and whatever. But, I mean, back to this one. I like this episode. I mean, I love this episode. I like this episode. There is a double fist in this one, isn't there? Doesn't he use it once? I have it in my notes. There was a double in the fight with. Okay, let's start with. I guess the point is there's this weird thing, the energy barrier in this episode that starts off the episode, which I don't know what the hell that is. So it's weird because this is just something they invented. It seems like couldn't you just go over or below it? It's just kind of there. It's like a thin red line. It's like why don't we just go over it or under it? Like it's like kind of a weird thing.
I think they fixed. Are you watching the remastered or the?
I've watched both.
So I actually haven't seen the original, but like in the remaster, like it seems like there's more there.
I think you're right. I think they made it like harder to, and they almost have to go into it because they're looking for what happened to the Valiant. So they almost make a decision. They kind of have to go into it, I guess, which is kind of a point. And this is a funny thing. Christian, my son's watching with me, and he's like he did not know what ESP was. So he's like, what that like is that a? He's like, did people talk about ESP? And I'm like, yeah, like I think back then, like, oh, what do you have ESP? Like like people would say that in my youth, but I feel like that's something that's kind of dropped off like our like vernacular. We don't use that as much as a conversational thing.
It dropped off after that episode. Like they never talk about that again.
Yeah.
I mean, Spock.
But it's not a thing that ever comes back, and it's not a thing I think anybody really talks about in society anymore. Like I never hear anybody. I don't know why they would like. If there's a term for it,
psychic maybe.
Psychic. Maybe it's more psychic.
Yeah.
But it's more than that because he can manipulate things.
Yeah. I was going to bring up, like, while they're approaching which, by the way, the barrier, like, they never really do this again. I'm guessing they were traveling, like, either up or down, like, as you see the galactic plane.
Right.
Which would set up why they never try to do that again.
Right.
Because it's just, there's a barrier on, up and down.
Yeah.
But, like, you kind of see, like, Spock's, like, military background coming out in this episode.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like
Spencer's Fullerton today, and they have kind of a submarine kind of vibe going in the beginning.
Yeah, like he's like shouting orders and like making himself heard over.
It's like, we're right here.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, like, and they set up the like special effects really early on.
Yeah.
Like things are exploding and like
yeah,
the
ship
are...
gets. effed up really bad. Like they lose a lot of controls, and usually they could fix it, and this time they can't fix it, which is like it's going to take us years to get back. We don't have warp drive. We don't have a way to energize the weapons. The control panels and stuff are all broken, so to speak. And then, but in the meantime, we've got this thing because now the guy who also gets killed by Hell the Computer. By the way, I always thought that was kind of funny that this guy is in two major sci-fi things of the 70s. This and 2001 gets murdered in both. And he plays, obviously, it's an interesting dynamic because I like the fact that they kind of have this young captain and he's got his young buddy with him and he probably shouldn't be there. That guy is probably only got that far because Kirk has a lot of influence because he's a young hotshot captain and he probably brought Gary with him. And Gary probably shouldn't even be on the ship. Like he's like inappropriate, like worse than anybody we've seen. Just like the walk-in freezer. He's a jerk. He's just he's a womanizer. Yeah. He doesn't seem really focused on his job.
No, unfortunately, we don't get to see him do a lot of his job because
Right.
he immediately gets zapped.
Right.
He's got like the tinfoil eyes that we were talking about.
That had to hurt back then.
Yeah,
I wonder how
That
they
had to
did that
really,
because
really, really hurt.
we were talking about this the other day when we were watching it. It's like I could only imagine that it looks like he actually has just like a layer of tinfoil.
I
in
think
his eyes.
they had kind of things that they would put in people's eyes back then.
They couldn't
like
nearly
the
have been
four-
as comfortable as
No,
they are
but
now.
not like nowadays. I mean, we don't have the materials that like we make contacts now. I remember like the original. I'm imagining there essentially were glass contact lenses, which were the first type of contact lenses were glass, and then they would fall out all the time. Like I never had them because by the time I had them, they had soft lenses. But my brother Tom, when he's 6 years older than me, so in the 70s. He had glass contact lenses. So I'm imagining this was some type of glass contact lens that they actually
Gross.
literally put in their eye, put in his eyes, which had to hurt like a mofo.
Yeah, he was kind of looking around throughout the entire. I don't think he could really see that well.
No, I think they kind of made it like, this type of thing.
Yeah. A line before that. We hadn't. Roddenberry hadn't established that Spock's mother was human yet.
Right.
He just said one of my ancestors was human. Like, which if you're taking this as like who would refer to their mother as an ancestor?
Yeah.
So honestly, this story seems less canon than The Cage. Like,
Sure. I would. Oh, I think that's a really good point. Like this does feel like, yeah. I'm wondering. Like, I guess I've never read, and I've read a lot of stuff. I've read about a lot of books about things, but it's never been. I don't think I've ever come across. And maybe somebody out there has read this. That why, like, he made the changes he had to make after The Cage was like, nope, we don't like that. But he did this, and oh yeah, we like this. It's good enough. But or there were probably more. Maybe there were more notes that they're like, you got to lighten it up. We don't like those costumes. They look like the shirts are all like, pinned together. Like make some better costumes. And let's put the girls in go-go's, in shorter skirts. So.
I mean, I didn't mind those costumes. They look pretty nice.
I like that they throw those costumes. You'll get a throwback to those costumes once in a while. Like, there's another episode coming up where Kirk interacts with Finnegan, his foil from college, and Finnegan has like one of the old style Federation uniforms.
Oh, yeah, that's
I've been
right.
waiting for you, Jimmy boy. I love Shore Leave. That's a great episode. I can't wait till we get to that's one of my favorites.
I think that's the most recent one I watched.
It's such a good episode. But I mean, I like that they they still say Earthship a lot in this episode too. I believe, don't they?
I think they say that a lot throughout all of season 1.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I watched season 1 and then I started rewatching for the podcast.
Okay.
I don't think Starfleet is ever mentioned.
That's
in
a good
season
question.
1.
I guess I'm gonna have to look that up, like when the first reference of Starfleet was. I'll do that for the next episode. But they quickly start to realize that Spock already senses there's a problem. Like in this, I like that Spock is already kind of on the job. That like the last guy was looking for ESP. Now these people are talking about ESP. And, like clearly already Kirk doesn't like that Sally Kellerman's character, Doctor whatever, is like she's all impressed with this, like, you know, like she wants to see I like that we have already in this first episode like some stuff that Spock's kind of on the job. He's always on the job. And that we also have this already, like this conflict of like, oh, you know, a better human would be great, you know, and Kirk's like, you know, no, like it won't be great. Like, you know, this guy's going to have too much power and he's not going to have the wisdom what to do with it. Like, you know, I like the conflict, you know, and then that inner conflict that obviously, you know, that Kirk's going through, because it's his friend. It's his friend from the academy. It's his oldest friend or whatever. So, you know.
Yeah, Spock was really like on it, and like also he did. I don't know if Spock's like telepathy had been established. I doubt it.
No, a lot of that was added as the years. They didn't have any of that. Like he didn't even have the Vulcan neck pinch until he created it.
But like he was just like very much just okay. This is bad.
Yeah.
Because like we see, you know, he as he's sitting in sick bay, as the
Right.
as Gary is sitting in sick bay, he's clicking through
He's reading like it, yeah.
half the ship's library apparently. Which, by the way, that computer screen, like it showed the technology of the time,
Right.
Because like they just didn't have the ability to do
Microfiche.
that. Like
It's basically microfiche.
yeah, like
It reminds me of going to the library back when I was in college in the 80s. Like you had to go through the microfiche and find these like Xeroxes or like
yeah.
camera, basically pictures of the newspaper. They weren't scanned. There was pre-scanning. So yeah, he's like just clicking it.
Yeah.
He's got the remote. He's just kind of clicking it. And it's the whole page. It's not like how we would read on like a template. You know, now
Yeah.
we're on our phones. You know, it's kind of cool. You know.
Yeah, you could see like one production detail in there, like as he, like in the shots where the computer screen has to like move around,
Right.
it's just the words and a backlight behind them.
Oh, okay.
So
I
like
didn't realize that.
like they
Yeah.
click it on and off, but like it's always the same page. They just kind of move the
I don't
arm
think I
around.
didn't catch that. I guess I didn't realize that.
'Cause
I like that scene when he's in the library and there's two cool things in that scene when Kirk comes in and he's talking to check on him and it's and he's like, you know, talking about you reading this long-haired stuff, which is obviously very 60s, you know, kind of a 60s reference. And then, you know, when he's talking to when the doctor comes in and she's quizzing him on his abilities to remember stuff, and he quotes a 1996 like poem, which is like it's one of the most important love songs written in all the time. It's funny, like that's our 1996 has come and gone like really really long time ago. But I like that there's already like this thing in canon that already happened.
Yeah.
You know, like a Star Trek's been around for so long. But then, like, I've always been freaked out. I love the music in this episode, the Alexander Courage music in this episode. Like, dun, 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 dun. It's like such, and then there's that shot where they're on the bridge and he looks at them from sickbay. And it's like, holy hell, he knows we're watching him, man. Like, it's a good freaky episode. Like, there's freaky stuff about the guy's abilities.
Yeah, during that, like, Kirk had already left, and that was just Spock, I'm pretty sure, just standing there staring at the screen, and then
Right.
the dude just looks at him and smiles at him.
Didn't I tell you to be nice to me?
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's some, like, really, you know,
He drops into God
he
talk for a
does-
second.
Yeah. But
Didn't
again,
I tell you not to
Yeah.
be good to me?
yeah, like that weird echo shit comes in, and Kirk, you know, Shatner does that turn.
He's like, "Whoa."
You know what? But I do like the fact, and I think the one thing that I'll say, I'll compliment them on the writing here, is that if it was a character of strong virtue, then it maybe you know, like if Kirk turned out, like Kirk probably wouldn't be as corrupted as easily. But this guy being kind of a weaker character anyways, he suddenly likes having all this power. You know, and then like how I can use and all that stuff that he says, like, you know, and obviously he's manipulating his ability. He's learning his abilities and he's doing, and then he's having some fun with people and stuff too. Like when they have that scene in the briefing room, which is those ridiculous bulkheads in the middle of like the room. Like they got rid of those by the next episode. Like, why do we got to walk around this big piece of metal to get over to like the other chair?
Yeah,
So.
I think it's implied that he has a pretty good relationship with the other guy. I can't remember his name right now. The other guy that got choked to death
Oh,
later on.
Kelso. Yeah.
Kelso.
Yeah.
Right. I think he had a pretty good relationship with Kelso, like
Right.
at the beginning of the episode, and then
yeah,
he's
they're
just like,
buddies. Like they're like the the kind of the Sulu Chekhov camaraderie.
yeah, and then you can kind of see that he well, not immediately, but like as soon as he gets these godlike powers, he more or less just drops that. He's
Right.
like, no, this guy's an idiot.
Yeah.
Like he,
Yeah, he evolves past his friend.
yeah.
Nat Neo, whatever the guy's name is. He's like, he says, "I'm like, I'm not joking." Like,
Yeah.
and it's a weird thing, and I like that aspect. That's a good catch. That he's already evolving past everybody, and I think the one he struggles the most with is Kirk. Because obviously that's his true friend. And then he's obviously like, it's neat. I mean, and then they get to the planet and they have to kind of it's funny because they do the thing where they give him a shot and then they like bring him to the transporter
Yeah.
and he's like standing. Why like,
Yeah,
if he's knocked out, how is he standing?
Yeah,
They
he-
kind of like leave him and they're like, don't fall off the path.
He's- oh,
You know,
God. I assume they just could
they
not
didn't
do
realize that
effect.
they didn't want to have more than one guy on the
Yeah.
pad. They put like their DNA would mix or something, and then you get like a Voyager Tuvix
Yeah.
thing. They didn't want that, So again, it's so early that they don't really. They don't know.
Yeah.
Again, they don't think anybody's been watching this shit in 60 years. Like, like
I mean, I assume the reason why they had to be single on the pad and why there was like so much just like direct like physical objects there
Right.
to direct you where to stand is because they probably had those effects pre-baked into their into whatever they were using to edit,
right.
and they just didn't have the ability to like expand that out into multiple people.
This
at
is one of
once.
those things that probably everybody knows, but there's a funny little tidbit here: is that the floor of the transporter room in the original Star Trek, they had they still had the round bases. Those bases became the ceiling of the Next Generation transporter room. It's like so they had those discs, and then
Interesting.
they had them. And there's so much stuff that's evolved from the transporter technology and that thing. Dr. Piper's awful. He's just like this, I hate that. Like his acting's terrible. Like it's just so bad. Like oh my god. Like I saw them go over the ridge towards the morning light, and I'm like oh my god. Like please, I hope somebody kill this guy. Like this guy's awful.
The old guy
Yeah,
Yeah.
the old doctor.
Yeah.
That obviously they decided to get DeForest Kelly
Yeah.
after that.
didn't even kill him. Just he just ceased to exist.
Yeah, they just like well
Not even
they
mentioned.
changed the crew. Well, they had to replace Kelso,
Yeah.
so they might as well like get Sulu out of the math department and bring him and let him be the helmsman.
Well, that-
There's a lot of neat stuff like though. I mean, they bring him down. They start figuring out like how to take those pieces out and so they can save the ship and that's the Star Trek-y like fix the ship. Already we've got that. That's that side. There's always that mechanical aspect of Star Trek. We got to fix the ship kind of thing. Which is very Star Trek-y. Like even on Strange New Worlds, when you get to season 3, Christian and I were watching an episode, and he's like, "I like the fact that the ship's broken. They got to fix the ship while all this other shit's going on." He's kind of likes that's a theme in Star Trek that the ship sometimes breaks.
Yeah, I like the terminology they used for that. By the way, like it's not repair the warp drive; it's regenerate the warp drive. I just thought it was an interesting little detail. It becomes, I think it stays regenerate. Like when they're talking about repairs, they use the word regenerate.
Yeah,
a
I
lot
think
in the first season.
in Nagant time, like he turns the engines off, and we're gonna get to that. And that's there's some other things too. That the technology of the warp drive. So you get down to that cool, for its time. It's funny because in Star Wars we have the volume now. And back in those days, the volume was essentially a soundstage with like a big cyc on the outer wall, and you just lit it different colors. And then you brought in fake rocks and some sand, and that's how you built. That's how you filmed out. Because obviously the challenges of filming out in the woods and the desert, which Star Trek does. But it probably was extremely expensive to do that. So you just went into the soundstage, and we get to see, it's funny. I bet you could probably see all those same rocks in about 30 episodes where they just move the rock this way and they paint them or whatever. And I like that bit when they go down to the planet and they kind of, and Gary, Gary kind of doesn't, it's kind of weird he doesn't just kill them all. But I mean,
He's like, yeah, I just knocked you out.
I don't need. They're
I'm-
not really a threat
yeah.
to me. Maybe he just figures they're not really a threat.
Yeah, that's pretty good explanation for it. Like
They're
he
like
kills
ants.
he kills Kelso because he is a direct threat to him because
Right.
Kelso would blow up the entire valley.
Right. Yeah.
To,
Which is kind of a cool thing because Spock's mad at him. Spock's mad at Kirk because Kirk doesn't want to see what this is. And then Spock comes in and he brings him the phaser rifle. He's like, which we never see the phaser rifle again. He's like, I didn't order a phaser rifle, and here Spock comes, rocking up with the phaser rifle, and then Spock is kind of surprised that Kirk did have another plan.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell Spock because it's none of Spock's freaking business, to be honest. Like, I'm the captain. So he told, it's Lee. Lee, could you make those things blow up if we needed to?
Mhm.
He says, yeah, I could rear a switch. And he's like, well, you stay here if the last man pull that switch. Like, they're dramatic, go to the commercial break thing. It's very Kirk. It is, and I like that that's established pretty early on.
Yeah, Spock. Speaking of Spock, and his phaser rifle, he from the very beginning, like almost as soon as like it became clear that Gary was becoming
Right.
something dangerous,
Right.
he was like, we should really consider killing him.
Yeah, because
Like,
the logic, and it is logical. Like the
yeah.
logic is, we better kill this guy before he kills us. Like there's not a there's not a humanity. There's not the compassion, and I only have logic. And he says that, like, so
I think like my favorite thing about that is that Spock's immediate reaction is just let's commit murder. Like
it was before the Vulcans kind of got like
more pacifists.
yeah, like they in the future they become more pacifist, like in the canon
Right.
as a society. But for right now, in like a lot of season 1, like Spock's just like, if the logical choice is to kill somebody, then it's time to die.
Well, for sure. And the one thing that's lacking in this episode, which starts to really happen, and I think it really doesn't even happen until the 5th episode with The Enemy Within, is when we finally start getting, which I think is why Star Trek works so well, is the Spock, McCoy, Kirk scenes,
Mm-hmm.
where Kirk's there, and there's it's like the angels and devil on your shoulder, so to speak, where you got emotional bones, and you got the exact opposite with Spock, and they combat it out, and Kirk just kind of listens, and it's this. I've always loved. I thought that trio. People always talk about the Kirk Spock relationship, but I think the trio of Spock, Kirk, and McCoy working shit out, in the corner of the bridge, or in the captain's quarters, or in sick bay, and like in that, you green-blooded son of a bitch, like that back and forth kind of stuff, and that Kirk, and he needs them both, and I think that's why, even as bad as Star Trek the Motion Picture is, the one thing they got right is that Kirk realizes to do this mission that he needs Spock and he needs Bones. And we don't get that yet, and we certainly don't get it with Dr. Piper. Yeah. And I don't think we don't really get it till The Enemy Within, when they finally start to learn to write some of these episodes a little bit better.
Yeah, this is an interesting episode in that, like, you just when talking about the overall characterization, because most of the characters aren't there yet. Like,
right.
So we can't
right.
really go.
It's a great. I love the fight at the end. I like Kirk's got the speech.
Mm-hmm.
The Kirk's famous for the big speech, and he's like, "Be a doctor for one more minute."
Yeah.
Does he know what to do with it? Do you see absolute power corrupting absolutely, and he's making him pray to me, Jim, pray to me, Captain. I like that, and then he has to, and there is a double fist punch. I remember there definitely is that first double fist punch in this, and he doesn't want to kill Gary, and he has a rock over his head. He's like, "Forgive me," and then he's like, "Too late," and he's right back. He's back, when he loses those eyes, somehow he goes back to just being kind of like, what the hell's going on? He almost doesn't even realize what has happened to him when he loses those abilities. And then they do get the tombstone wrong, by the way.
Yep, William R. Kirk.
Yep, it's not R. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't know that his middle name was Tiberius. Maybe it never came up when they were drinking in the bar in the academy.
They said William R. Kirk, James R. Kirk.
James R. Kirk.
James Riberius Kirk.
Riberius, yeah.
yeah.
And Tiberius isn't really a thing until the animated series anyways. They say James T. Kirk, but Tiberius isn't established until the animated series. Yeah. And that's considered canon, so that's when it becomes Tiberius.
Yeah. I mean, I like Roddenberry, actually, if I remember correctly, I read that Roddenberry actually spoke on that mistake specifically.
Right.
He was like, "Yeah, this isn't a real god. It's somebody who's acting like a god, but is infallible,"
Right.
which is decent explanation, decent cover.
Yep. I mean, obviously they have the challenge of how does he kill him, and so he couldn't shoot him, so he crushes him with a rock. And I guess that's the best you're gonna. I guess that it works. It makes sense that you could distract him long enough that the rock falls on him. He didn't have the time to whatever. His powers aren't established enough yet, and then Hot Lips Houlihan from Ash the Movie dies too, and
She just kind of
she gets it too, and she even says, you don't know what it's like to almost be a god.
Mm-hmm.
And like I do say that the two guest stars in this episode were both really good.
Mm-hmm.
They were well-known actors at the time. I mean, she was well-known. Obviously, he was well-known. Shatner was obviously a movie actor, a small movie actor, but they had good guest stars in this episode. And it's a good episode. You can see why. I can see why they didn't use it as the first episode they aired, but at the same time, I can see why they said, "Oh, we've got something here."
Yeah, that would have been weird if it was the first episode, because you'd be like, "Oh, look, who are all these people?" And then all
Well,
gone.
quite often when you watch pilot episodes of shows, a lot of them now are like spin-offs or something. But quite often they'll film the pilot and then they go away for months and then they come back. That was definitely how it was at this point. Like where, I think nowadays a lot of times the shows are made and they order 5 episodes. So they're filming the first 5 episodes, including the pilot, especially if it's something that they're really expecting they're going to bring in.
Yeah.
Maybe not sitcoms, but I feel like a lot of your action type shows they're gonna order 5 episodes, not just one.
Yeah, I'm guessing like with Strange New Worlds, they probably just ordered the whole first season and
Because they're gonna drop it. They're not gonna order one at a time. So and then as soon as the first episode aired, they were like, okay, we already ordered season 2. Season 3 was ordered as soon as episode 2 of the second season came out. Anything else you got in this episode?
just some like production stuff.
Yeah.
My guess is like with the cup sliding across the table, that was probably a magnet under the table, just because of the way it looked. And then with the cup flying to his hand, if you look closely, you can see the string, and like, it's like a little black line. And when he grabs it, he drinks it, the string's still there. Like it's, and then Kirk
Well, cool,
grabs-
because it's a wide shot, so
Yeah.
it works. And I guess I gotta have to go watch the Blu-ray or something on a higher definition and see if you can see it. Probably on streaming, it's still kind of blurry sometimes, especially with crappy Spectrum. You probably can't always see it.
Yeah, I doubt you could see that in the original broadcast.
It's I do like I mean this is an episode I rewatch.
Mm-hmm.
There's episodes that I skip, but if I'm watching TV or in the old days, if I threw out took one of the VHSs out and threw it in, this is an episode. If I haven't watched that in a while. I mean, I like this because I like the fight scene. I like the first rip shirt.
Yep.
He's got the broken hand or whatever. At the end, and Christian and I were laughing about the weird light that was on. It was like a light, but it was a microphone. But it wasn't. It was a light, but it was what was that stupid thing sitting on the side of the chair? They got rid of all of those between that and when they come back the next episode.
Yeah, it seemed like, I don't even know. He was talking into it, so I assume.
Yeah, it was a microphone. It's not a light, but I think
Yeah.
it was a light that they just used
Yeah.
as a microphone. Why doesn't he? I don't know. It's just kind of funny. So, but it's what it is.
well.
All right.
Yeah, that probably covers where no man has gone before.
Yeah.
So
Moving on. Now we are on to
the naked time.
the naked time.
All right, so let me just read off of this. Here's the naked time box.
This is another one of my favorite episodes.
Whoa, almost lost it. Okay. Sent to pick up a research team, the Enterprise finds the scientists dead. One of the landing party brings the disease back to the crew, forcing suppressed emotions to the surface. It's an interesting way to put it. Sulu becomes a modern-day
Swashbuckler.
D'Artigan.
Yeah, that's from the Three Musketeers.
Lieutenant Kevin Riley shuts down the engines. Spock and Kirk are also affected. In one of the series' most powerful scenes, they help each other overcome their inner fears. Kirk races against time before the ship is pulled into the disintegrating planet. Boy, they wrote that really weird on the back of this.
Yeah, that one's not. That one's kind of. I don't think the same guy wrote that one.
Yeah, just lots of periods.
Yeah.
September 29th, 1966 was the
Okay.
original air date.
So yeah, this is the 4th episode. You know, it's like I think like they're beaming down to the planet, and then like pretty much describes it. They come up and they've got this disease, this infection, which basically is like you're really drunk
Yeah.
and you lose all your inhibitions. And it's funny because everybody seems to catch it at different rates,
Yeah.
which is fine. And I'm gonna, like they're not drunk.
Yeah.
So it's everybody's metabolism is going to process this thing different. So I mean, I know some people have been going, well, how come Kirk gets it in 12 seconds? Well, it's a plot device, but at the same time, other characters get it quickly, and it's neat because they talk about the character. They talk about because we get that situation where we like the first guy gets sick is Joe.
Yeah.
And Joey starts to go, like, why are we like he they know that in his character that he questions why we're in space, but he keeps re-upping, as Kirk says. But because of his insecurities and his questioning of why we do this, it overwhelms him, and it takes away his will to live, so to speak. He wants to commit suicide, and I think that scene in the conference or the lunchroom. It's a neat scene because there's a lot of secondary characters. Like Kirk's not there, Spock's not there. It's the other characters get a scene, and they're like, and O'Reilly, they got that little salt, little shaker thing in the background, and he's like, but like with the music, it to me it works. Like, what the hell's on my hand? Like, what is this? Like, and then I like that. I like that it's not, it's a physical like whatever that it gets into your system.
Yeah, it works into Spock's later explanation of it. It's not actually a virus or anything. It's like some altered state of water that doesn't exist.
Right.
Like it's like a chemical composition rather than, some kind of virus or bacteria.
It's more like a psychotic drug,
Yeah.
like in a sense that it affects your mental, like, something like LSD or something. Like it's doing something. It's not in your bloodstream as much as it's affecting your psyche, which is interesting. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this episode to unpack. I mean, Spock, we start to get a little bit more of the Spock aspect. We get Uhura now, and I like Uhura in this episode a lot. I think there's a lot of cool moments with Uhura. And I don't know, because we saw her in Mantrap, and then we see her again in this episode, and we start to see her relationship with Kirk. There's a lot of goofy things in this episode. Like, there's only one door in engineering. They couldn't just blow it up with a phaser, but obviously you got to have some plot devices. I do like the bit where O'Reilly just keeps getting on the intercom.
Yeah.
And he's like, Captain Thomas O'Reilly, like one more. And he starts singing, like, I'll take you home again, Kathleen. And there's a lot going on, and Kirk's trying to hold it all together. Even though the ship's spiraling down into the planet, it's just, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, so like for what Joe was his name?
Yeah.
Idiot. Like, he goes down onto this planet, and
Yeah.
he's got the safety suit,
Yeah. Which doesn't seem all that safe.
and he's just
But
like, all right, well, let me.
I got an itch.
Yeah, let me
I
just
got a
take my
itchy-
glove
yeah.
off.
Let me
and
take my glove off
scratch
and
my
just
nose.
Yeah.
run my hand along the nice cold pillar and then let this thing get on
The
my...
nice
yeah,
red
it's-
stuff that they used, like the camera upside down and have it like pour on in slow motion.
Yeah, also those weird space outfits.
I mean,
Yeah.
it
Those
was
were cool.
technology at the time. Like, I imagine, like, if they were gonna do like that again, then the dude basically just took his like spacesuit and just went,
Well, it's like COVID. People just wore their mask under their chin.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thing. Like, it's not really doing anything, but he didn't really pay attention. He missed that day. He missed the day of infectious diseases.
Yeah.
when
he
they
missed
told you what to
infection
do.
training day.
When he was sick that day. Put the knife down, Joey. You're all steamed up, Joe. It's just like, it's a good. I mean, I think that scene is well directed. I think the scene when they're doing surgery and they're like, closing, and he just dies.
Yeah.
And McCoy's just like, this. He should just get up and walk out of here. Like, I've lost patience before, but like, this guy just lost the will to live. Like, and like, even and Nurse Chapel's like, he's dead. Like what? Like it's just bizarre. Like like they're so over like trying to. They do figure out what it is pretty quickly, but then they have to find the cure, which I thought was kind of cool. That's like again the sciencey we have to solve the problem thing in the midst of crisis and how we handle ourselves during crisis. I think is a big part of Star Trek.
Yeah, like the fact that this they figure this out and they're like, okay, well, how do we cure this though?
Right.
And also, we're spiraling down towards the planet at an increasing rate.
Right.
You get this could have been a very short episode. Like if Joe had recognized that he felt weird and just went to sickbay immediately and got put under quarantine, that would just been the end of the episode. But as established, Joe's an idiot.
Right.
So we actually
and they do contamination.
Yeah.
Remember when they
yeah.
get there, like Spock stops and was like, decontaminate. Yeah. We don't know. There's some kind of space madness that we've not seen before. And, Spock realizes again, we got a problem. Like quickly he understands that. And then Kirk goes to see McCoy and he says, like, coincidence? He's like, you're going to ask me, he was on the landing party and he's like, he's been medically checked. Like we've done our book. We don't like, and they have that interaction where, already where, Kirk gets impatient with his people sometimes when like, you got to work harder, got to do a better job. Don't suck at your job. And, and there's that bit. I think that stuff's all really good, and then at this point now it's all over the place because now both your guys they literally just leave. Yeah. And one of them, Sulu, just leaves and goes to the gym and gets his sword out.
Yeah, like that was an interesting part of that. Like it's so unexpected. Like it kind of tells the
right.
It kind of points to how well this ship normally functioned. That nobody even noticed they were gone at first. Like you wouldn't even expect them to be gone.
Like O'Reilly stays, and you can see that he's covering for Sulu because he didn't want to get his friend in trouble because he's infected, but not like it takes longer for him to show signs. It's like, Sulu, you can't just leave. Like, so he stays there, and then by the time Spock realizes that Sulu is gone, it kicks in. He's like, have no fear, O'Reilly is here, and they go into that whole bit.
Oh my gosh, the camp with him.
Yeah, he's bad.
He's so bad.
But he's playing. It's like like when you're in community theater and you're like, I'm gonna pretend I'm drunk now. So I like my whiskey like in a glass, like, and it is. It's like it's bad community theater acting.
Oh man,
he was an actor of his time.
Yes,
like you especially like in that scene where he first gets infected.
Right.
Like as he's talking to the guy, it's like, Riley, this isn't you. This isn't you. And it's like, okay, well, he's like acting like you would in the 40s,
right,
like.
Right. Well, that's right, copper. We're gonna. Well, it's funny when he's in the. I do like when he's in and he's like, and he's like pressing the buttons like they're like a keyboard, and he's just kind of doing the stuff. And he's like, there'll be a formal dance in the bowling alley tonight, and women show restraint when you wear makeup. Women should not look made up. And when he's saying that, there's a great shot of her where she's fucking pissed. She's like, I'm going to cut this bitch off right now. Like, she's like, and then I love that interaction. I think I mentioned this one before with Sulu, I'm assuming with her and Kirk. And he's like, could you at least try to cut him off? And he's like, if you think I would cut him off, don't you think I'd cut him off? And and he goes way overboard on Uhura. And he waits a second. He's like, sorry. Like, I love that aspect of Kirk that he knows when he's wrong. Like, and he like it's like it's her. She's the best. She's the best. Like, I shouldn't have yelled at her. Like, and he he's a hothead, and then he apologizes. I'm that way, so I get that. Like,
he's just it's a good show of humanity from the character that he's just like, he breaks and then he's just immediately comes back, realizes what he did was wrong, and calms down.
We got Yeoman Rand running around in this, and obviously we're supposed to kind of feel in season 1 that there was a weird attraction between Kirk and Yeoman Rand. She's clearly in love with him, and he knows it, but he knows he can't act on it. That's important in this episode. I like the episode. I like I've always liked the interactions between Scotty and Spock because they're both really, really good at their jobs and they really, really respect each other. But sometimes Spock has to remind him, like, I got to have a safety margin. He's like, you're going to take longer than we've got left. You can't afford a safety margin. And, so there's that. I do like those interactions between Spock and I think Scotty's already on and he's already like, if you guys just don't start taking showers with the clothes on, my engine can pull us out of anything. So there's kind of like that kind of tongue-in-cheek stuff with Scotty. He never gets infected because he's never really interacting with anybody. He's pretty much just over by the engine room trying to get back in. And then he's the one who realizes he's turned the engines off. Like, they're completely cold. It's going to take half an hour to re-energize them. Like, holy, like, I cannot change. That's that first Scotty. I cannot change the laws of physics. I've got to have 30 minutes. And it's just like, that's that first. That's why I love this episode because to me, it's really when we get all their characters and who they are. Like, we really do. Everybody's who they are. Like, for the rest of the run.
Yeah. They're all basically who they're gonna stay for the rest of the all the episodes coming after this.
The big reveal. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off.
Oh no, you're good. I don't think we get much McCoy and Spock in this episode, if I remember.
No,
correctly.
not really. Not really.
Also like some historical perspective, like he says the one who goes into the engine room, I keep forgetting his name.
Right.
He's like, well, his mistake was he wasn't born an Irishman, and he's not Irish, and like it kind of like shows like the well, he's not like typically Irish.
Right.
Like as in like he had ancestry of being Irish. It shows the historical like significance of that because that used to matter back then.
Sure.
Like especially being Irish back in the 60s.
Sure.
Like,
Oh yeah, right.
that
That's a good point. I think that's a good point that he's Irish. Obviously they made a big point of casting characters from all over Earth, and obviously some of them are at that point enemies of the United States. So that's important. And I don't know if the Irish stuff has anything to do with just the struggle, but definitely Like I guess I didn't realize that. That it's kind of like that fake Irish stuff, and they like Googled. However, they Googled back then, like what's a good Irish song that we can have him sing.
Like he struck me as an Irish American.
Yes,
the character
and his mental, he kind of goes back into this like his background, and that's what he pulls up. Everybody pulls up a different thing, so to speak. And then the big reveal to me is the Chapel being in love with Spock thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that they didn't go overboard with like Sulu. They're like, all right, Sulu just likes fencing. They're not like,
Yeah.
Well, he should act like a samurai. No, that's
right. Like he just into that, and they keep that in. It's a funny thing because that's a canon thing that they keep in the first JJ movie, like that Sulu's good at fencing, and he's like they kind of that was the thing that a little bit of the lazy JJ surface level fandom, but they did pull that in. Of course, we never see him with a suit. We never see him with a sword again. I don't think. Maybe in that one episode where all the weapons are turned into swords. When we get to that, we'll have to rewatch that. But yeah, definitely like Sulu's not. He's just running around amok. He's just running amok, like so to speak. But the scene with Chapel and Spock is really, really good. I love you, like you hide your feelings, which is very cool because it you guys are watching Strange New Worlds, and this is going to tie into Strange New Worlds to some extent. That they have a relationship there's feelings, so to speak. I don't want to spoil it for you. So there's definitely like feelings, and he clearly like knows it, and I feel like he likes her too. But
we just watched the episode the other day when him and T'Pring swap bodies.
Right. That's
and
really cool.
And at the very end, she straight up is like, "Yeah, I have feelings, but not for the guy I was talking to." And I looked at him and I was like, "She's in love with Spock."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
and
so
that starts
obvious.
to come up
She
in
can't.
this,
so obvious.
And that's why like in the JJ movie, I was frustrated that they made Spock kind of hook up with Uhura, and I realized they had Zoe.
Yeah.
Samalda, whatever her name.
I mean,
is.
Zoe Saldana.
they-
Sedona, like they wanted because she was a big star, so they had to give her a bigger part. But maybe they could have just had Nurse Chapel in the movie, like and Nurse Chapel, like 'cause
Yeah, and
to
then
me,
they-
like it's such a violation.
And then
of-
they replaced her
stuff.
in the second movie with Alice Eve's character.
yeah,
What was her name? Oh, Marcus.
yeah, that's
Carol.
Dr. Carol Marcus, which is going to be important, obviously later because we meet Carol Marcus in Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Speaking of that, like they do set this up like
Yeah.
that's the scene where Chapel and Spock are having their moment.
And she literally like touches his face, and she's literally like, you can see that it's transferring into him, and it has a profound effect on him because Vulcans have emotion; they're just in control. And this is the first episode for sure where Leonard Nimoy said to the director and everybody, like, this is let me just do this scene. Let me nail this fucking scene. And that scene in the conference room when he goes in and he's just like, he's crying and he's like in the hallway, like, he's walking down the hallway and he starts to like cry. Like, and then the music's all dramatic. He goes into the conference room because he just has to get away from everyone and he just tries to focus. And that scene, there's a legendary thing for that scene because it's one take. They did that scene in one take in one shot, and most of it was unscripted. And all the script said was essentially Spock struggles with emotions. And I think he went to the director and the writer of that episode and said, I have an idea. Can I just go with it? And they were like, we don't even do. And then he's trying to do mathematics to try to say, I'm sorry. And he literally just starts crying and crying and crying and crying. And I just love that scene
Yeah, that
because he says, I'm in control of my emotions. I'm in control. Like, he just can't. He just can't. It's not that he doesn't have emotions, that he has to control them. And this is destroying. It's like when you're like trying not to laugh, and then you laugh even harder because you're trying not to laugh.
Yeah, he really works like logic into him trying to overcome his like this corrupting force.
Right.
Like the fact that he's doing equations like
Right.
to like pull himself back into this state of absolute logic, I guess
Right.
you'd call it. Which it gives an insight into how Vulcans actually like mentally prepare themselves because like they're not born like this.
Right.
Like this is something they train to do.
Yes. This is cultural.
Yeah, rather than an innate quality
Because
of their.
if a Vulcan was born on Mars, or whatever, and had no access to their society, they would be a very different person. This is all very societal. There's a lot of societal norms for Vulcans. Yes.
And they bring it up later on in the series, but they'd actually be a very dangerous person if they
they're
didn't
significantly
control.
more powerful. They're
Yeah.
at least twice as powerful as the average human.
Mhm.
Which brings up in the second JJ movie that's why Spock fights Khan versus Chris Pine fighting Khan.
Yeah,
because he's gonna get his ass kicked.
Yeah, that Khan was a lot stronger than the original one.
I kind of in the movies. So, that scene's great, and then it leads to one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Trek, was when Kirk and Spock have that first kind of showdown between the two of them, and he's like slapping him around,
Yeah,
and then he just gets mad and just
Yeah.
whacks him, and he flies across the table. Like,
Oh my god, that was
he just
hilarious.
flies across the table. And that's him. Like they didn't have a stunt double for that one. He literally did that one himself. And he's like, "Don't tell me again, science officer. It's a theory. It's possible. We may go up with the biggest fireball since the last sun of these parts exploded, but we got to take this 1 in 10,000 chance."
Yeah.
Like it's just so over the top, like William Shatner acting. But it's just great because I just don't picture anyone else being Captain Kirk.
Just the fact that he's eating those slaps. Like he just
Yeah.
bam, just
Yeah.
Spock's just like
He didn't
talking
fist punch him, double
about
fist punch him, which would have really been more effective. Let's be honest, if he would have
Yeah, no, you gotta really
it's a
lay
theory.
into
Yeah.
Spock's just like it's never been done. It
Never
won't work.
Done. Like,
It won't work.
And then
Kirk's just like,
and then because of what Spock witnesses, it gives him enough ability to focus and get control of himself again. Maybe his metabolism just processes that disease quicker. Again, Vulcans are always supposed to be so different. They work that into everything. Kirk gets hurt really quick. Like he gets, maybe because of his heightened state of emotion, maybe his, people always like, he gets it too quick. Well, maybe that's just, it's not alcohol. It's just everybody reacts to it differently. And obviously there's not enough time for him to take 20 minutes because the episode would be over.
Yeah.
But I love that scene when he's like, now I know what she's called. Yeah, I can't touch her. Like I can't have a relationship with her. No, what does he say? No braid on my shoulder. And then there's two really great moments in that. Scotty comes in. He's like, Scotty, help. But he stops because he's so Kirk. He can't say help me. He's got to get it. He's just got to do it himself. And then he says, and then when he tells them to clear off and he's going to come to the bridge, he's like, never lose you, never. And I always love that because like, this is my fucking ship and I'm not losing it. Like I've got a responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a theme with Kirk.
Yeah, I like that. Like he's like, I really am attracted to Yeoman Rand, or is this in a different episode? No, this is in this episode. Yeah. He's like, I'm really attracted to Yeoman Rand, but I'm married to this ship.
Yeah.
That was literally the line that was going through my head, and yeah.
I mean, that's why I've always loved that line. Never lose you.
Yeah.
Never. I love that. Like that he's got to be captain, and then it's and we don't have these kinds of heroes to this level anymore because it's campy. But I still like this. I still like that. That he fights it, and he has to be on the bridge, and he has to see it through. Like that's his job. Like I think modern sci-fi, he would be like, he's in sick bay. Whatever. You did say, you brought it up earlier, like with McCoy saying like when he's on the thing and like they do the sciencey explanation. It's water. Water is transformed in complex molecules or whatever.
Yeah, they eventually neutralize it with some kind of a thing. And like we got to cover this before we end though, but the results of Spock's calculations, the implosion or inverse implosion or whatever they called it.
Yes.
Time warp.
Suddenly we're in a time warp.
That's where we end on that episode.
And we may use it someday, Mr. Spock. Yeah. Like, okay, yeah, we are. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, let's, because they didn't need it. They didn't need it, and it just could have been brought into other episodes later. But like, no, let's just throw it in.
Yeah.
Now we have a time machine.
Yeah. Instead of doing that again, they're just like, all right, well, we'll just slingshot around the sun.
Right.
Well,
I feel like this is very similar to the slingshot effect. Because you're going into warp in close proximity to something with a high gravitational state, which is why they do the slingshot around the sun. So it is the same technique. That's the way I've always viewed it. Because they obviously they didn't show it visually, but I feel like if this is the planet, they're going into warp around the planet and spinning out. So they're using the gravitational force and the warp to come out of it is what they do when they go around the sun. So it doesn't have to be a sun. It just has to be something with high gravitational. Remember that planet was like...
Yeah, it was...
going whatever, nova or whatever.
It was compressing. So that actually makes more sense than what I was thinking because they were like going really fast around the planet. What I was thinking is like when they did the implosion, the ship was literally traveling in warp backwards, like away from the planet, away from where they'd come at the...
nowadays we'd get a better special effect of what the ship looked like it was doing. Yeah. I've always assumed that it just went into warp and then just like zoomed around and came out around the other side. Yeah. But that or they got stuck in the gravitational forces. They were speeding up, and then once they came out, it's the same way they go around the sun and come out.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I like your explanation. Your read of the situation works better with the established canon, though. Like. Okay. Is very much just like, they're going really fast, they restart the engine, and then they're traveling backwards through time, and then full reverse brings you out of time warp. So I guess time warp is a state of being.
I've always thought of time warp when they're in time warp. It's kind of like they're in... They're almost like when you're in warp, but they're just going back. They're going through time instead of through time. They're going through space. I guess it's like Doctor Who. Instead of they're going through time, they're not going through space. So when they're in a time warp versus warp drive, so I guess maybe that's why warp is being utilized. And that's one of the things like time warp has become something in sci-fi that we all use. But time warp started on Star Trek. Like it was just time travel. before that, but then they started calling it time warp, and now everybody calls it. A lot of sci-fi calls it time warp.
Yeah, that's
know?
one of the things that's interesting is watching like all the initial like the things that we take for granted in sci-fi
Right.
that started in Star Trek, like the galactic barrier. Star Wars apes that later on.
Right.
Like they're just like, yeah, there's a barrier.
Cloaking device.
Yeah.
A lot of things that that have just been kind of co-opted or whatever, and they taken in other fandoms, so to speak. Which is great. I mean, that's obviously there's the legacy, which is kind of cool. This again, this is an episode that I will just watch.
Yeah, this is a good episode. Not so it's not one of the episodes where it like is commentary on society, but like it's still a pretty good episode. Like you get, all these different character interactions. You get time warp.
This is a really important episode for character development.
Yeah.
And, back when they had 22, 26 episodes a season or whatever it was, they had the time to do that, which I think is kind of great. You know?
Well, I don't think we're going to be able to get to...
no, I don't think so.
What's...
Enemy Within is
the
the
Enemy
next
Within,
episode.
yes.
But I need you to go to my camera because I want to show you that I'm prepared for the next episode. Have you seen The Enemy Within?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been watching. I've been trying to watch
Ray B.
most
Kirk,
of season
Captain
one.
Ray B. Kirk.
Oh boy, yeah,
Yep.
I'm in.
Right?
I've seen it.
So I just want to say that I'm prepared for the next episode.
Yeah.
So
Yes. That one's got...
I have the Sorry and Brandy.
Oh my gosh, that
I'm
is
ready
awesome.
for the next episode. Give me the brandy. So I'm just ready to start walking through this ship like, who can I? Have a sip of the Sorry and Brandy. There's nothing in there. Maybe for next week we'll put some Sorry and Brandy in it. I made this myself. I'm very inspired by this show, this podcast. This has been one of the coolest things I've been doing lately. I'm telling you, I look forward to this. I really appreciate you wanting to do this show. And so I told my wife, I said, I got to start making some Star Trek props. So I made the Sorry and Brandy bottle, which this was a whiskey. It's some type of Tennessee whiskey. And the bottle came like with brown straps. And obviously back then they didn't have they weren't laser printing shit. So they just basically took the leather and dyed it, I'm assuming. So I had to go buy the I bought the bottle, but then the red I went and bought.
Yeah, that's really cool.
At Joanne Fabrics.
Oh, that reminds me. Speaking of next episode, so I've kind of interpreted this podcast as almost like a watch party, really.
Sure.
So I want to get the audience involved. So I've set up an email. It is doublefistpunchpodcast@gmail.com. You can send in your feedback on the episodes we're going to cover, and like if it's interesting perspectives that we haven't thought of or anything like that, we'll read it out on the podcast and talk about it.
That's a cool idea.
So the next episodes we're going to cover are The Enemy Within and probably what's the next episode after that called?
Because we might as well mention it because that way if people we can get anybody. Because I'd love to have some other people's interpretations of some things. Obviously, while I'm looking it up, what were your thoughts on these two episodes? You didn't really say too much.
Well, you guys kind of said everything I was gonna say. I don't.
It's Mud's Women.
Oh, Mud's Women.
Oh, that's a good one.
Angels.
That was good.
Angels
Charlie's
instead.
Angels, but the '60s.
Those women were really hot. Let's just say that now. Yeah. They were good. I don't care I don't know what planet or generation you're from. Those women were all pretty hot.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I remember being a young man like, whoa, space is cool.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of production quality talk during that episode because there's a lot of production things they did in that episode, which I'm excited to talk about.
Oh,
so,
okay. And I have not, and I, the funny thing about Mud's Women, and obviously that's a character that comes back. Not only does that character come back in another episode of the original series, Harry Hardcore Fenton Mudd comes back in the animated series. And then they also brought in a different actor to play that character on Discovery, and I can't think of the actor's name. He's from one of those comedic shows that everybody likes. He's on that. He comes back for a couple episodes in Discovery as Hardcore Fenton Mudd. So it's a character very deep rooted in Star Trek. But I have to admit, Mud's Women is not an episode I watch a lot, so I have to rewatch that episode.
Yeah, it's production wise, it's a very impressive episode. And, a lot of characterization as well. So I can't wait to get to it.
Start talking about fuel. We actually
yeah.
talk about fuel, like which sometimes
Yeah.
other sci-fis never kind of bring up fuel.
Yeah, I think that's also when they introduced dilithium, or
Yes, I
maybe
think
they
you're
haven't
right.
yet.
No, I think this is when because I think that's where they go to that planet. But again, that's where we need to rewatch it. So I need to
Alright.
anyway. So.
He's played by Rainn Wilson.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah. He's
Wow.
pretty good. He's pretty good on it. He's pretty good. I couldn't think of the
I guess
actor's
we
name.
gotta watch Discovery.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a nice, again, that Discovery does some nice things where they throw back to the original series. Because obviously Discovery takes place 10, 12, 13 years, well, the first few series, because obviously there's a time travel thing in that show. But the beginning part of Discovery takes place before, 15, 16 years before Captain Kirk takes control of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Which causes a lot of problems within the fandom.
Well, I'm excited to get to Discovery. I like the fact that like at the very beginning their costumes are like a mix between Enterprise costumes and
Yes.
modern costumes.
Yeah, I think they do.
So,
That
yeah.
There's a lot of good production stuff that I do agree when we get to
And then they
Discovery,
get
there's-
really ugly.
Yeah.
They become that extremely ugly gray.
Don't get me started on the Klingons, though.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
All right.
But
Well, yeah, when we
anyway,
get to the Klingons, we'll talk about the Klingons. So.
take us out, Rick.
So I want to thank everybody for watching. So that's the email address for your feedback on. I've already forgotten. Muds Women and The Enemy Within will be doublefistpunchpodcast@gmail.com. And I want to thank everybody for watching again, and thank my lovely assistant over there, dressed as Spock.
And again, he looks a lot like Ethan Peck in season.
He's killing
3,
it too.
Season
He's
4 of Discovery.
he's killing it. Seriously, he's
No, he's
like
great.
he's definitely my favorite part of Strange New Worlds. So
And I want to thank my co-host for joining me today.
Well, thanks for. I think this is great. I love doing this. I hope people start watching this and spread the word if you're a Star Trek fan, because again, we're fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, we pick on it a little bit, but we're not gonna be we're fans, and it's a pleasure to do this.
Yeah, I want you to watch Star Trek. All right.
All right,
Well, that's gonna do it. Have a good night, and don't forget.
practice.
Yep.
Dun, 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 dun.